Hey guys, this is Jamie with TechNation, and I'm excited to be back for November's live demo, our Tools of the Trade live demo series that got started earlier this year. And I can't wait to share a little more about what we're going to talk about today. Of course, I want to welcome our guest, Brent Waite. He's with LifeSpark Medical, and we're going to discuss the SmartTank tester. During today's demo, we will learn how the SmartTank facilitates proper testing of your CO2 modules and gas monitors while saving time and gas. The SmartTank is an all-in-one testing device for CO2 gas modules and anesthesia monitors. The SmartTank automates the testing of these devices, providing better testing in less time using less gas, all documented in detailed test reports. With an easy-to-use interface, the SmartTank has a preloaded test sequence that will walk the operator through each step quickly and seamlessly. All the hardware needed to test gas modules is built into the SmartTank. That's replacing the need for separate gas regulators, flow meters, syringes, tubes, pressure gauges, barometers, and even the service manual. So I can't wait till we get into the demo and Brent can share a little more about this great tool. But first, I want to thank, and of course, TechNation would like to thank today's sponsor, LifeSpark Medical. This is a medical development company that creates innovative medical devices and products. Their team includes experts and engineers and technology who develop safe and effective solutions. The company specializes in diagnostic tools and treatment of various medical conditions and dedicated to improving healthcare and making a positive impact on people's lives. I hope all of our attendees today take some time to visit smarttanktesters.com. Again, that's smarttanktester.com. That's the website where you can learn more about the resources and the solution that we're going to go over today. But first, I've got a couple of reminders for you. First, this demo is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI. If you are participating because you need a CE certificate, then 1 hour after the completion of the demo, you're going to receive an email. That email will have a link to a survey that you will need to complete. Once you complete that survey, you will receive the certificate. You can download it to your computer, printed at your convenience. If you have any trouble with that process, you can always reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Of course, we're going to wrap up today's demo with a live Q&A. So anytime during the presentation, you can use that question feature on your webinar dashboard. You can send us questions in real time. We'll stop, we'll ask Brent. He said it was great that we can interrupt him and have some questions about what he's doing and presenting at the moment, or we can save it to the end of the presentation. We'll go through as many questions as time will allow. And lastly, I want to let everybody know that on that webinar dashboard on your computer, there's also a handout section. Be sure that you visit that section because there are 2 PDFs for your download today. LifeSpark Medical shared those with us, some great content that I want to make sure that you can get your hands on too. All right, as I mentioned, Brent's going to be our guest and we're going to talk about the smart tester, but first, let's get started with an attendee poll. Brent, are you ready to see what the attendees are thinking
Sure.
so far?
Let's do it.
All right, attendees, I'm going to launch the first poll. You should see it on your screen now. The question is, do you do gas monitors, PMs? Your options are yes or no. It's a pretty simple question to get us started. So while you're taking time to answer that poll by selecting your answer, I do want to remind everybody we have another MD Expo coming up. It's going to be in April in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can find more information about this conference by visiting mdexposhow.com. And I know Brent and LifeSpark Medical is going to be there as well. So it's another opportunity for you to see them and maybe get to see this tool in person and get your hands on it for a live demo. But Brent, looks like most of the audience has voted. So I'm going to close the poll, share the results with everyone. Attendees, do you do gas monitor PMs? Brent, I don't think you're surprised here. 88% of the attendees say yes, they do, and 12% say no. So I'm going to hide these results. It's going to take us back over to the presentation. I'm going to stop talking, Brent. I'm going to turn this over to you to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about the SmartTank.
Great, I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk to you today about how to test CO2 modules and how the SmartTank can help with that. So my name is Brent. I've got a master's in engineering and a business degree, and at LifeSpark we develop medical devices. About 5 years ago, we got some funding from the National Institute of Health to actually study how people test their CO2 modules and anesthesia monitors, and ultimately to develop a device designed specifically for this. And with their help and that funding, we developed the SmartTank. So I'm excited to talk about it. My goals today are to talk about capnometry a little bit, just to give us a common background. We're going to look at capnometry and the different devices that are out there. We're going to look at how those devices can fail and what are those common failure modes and how does that impact the readings. We're going to talk about best practices when testing, and in the end, we're going to do a demo of the SmartTank, which is really the best way to get to know the device. So some of this you may know, but capnometers measure CO2 in the patient's breath. They're often called end-tidal modules, gas modules, CO2 modules. There's lots of different names for them. And they can be standalone devices or built into other devices. So here's some examples of capnometers or gas modules you might be familiar with. The Philips one's very popular, the GE, all of these are pretty common. There's a subset of gas monitors, which are the Anesthesia gas monitors. These are like their other brothers. They measure CO2, but they also measure oxygen, nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, and the anesthetic agent, and they all produce a waveform of those gases. And so they're just more complicated gas monitors, but they have PMs just like a regular capnometer. Don't confuse these with gas vaporizers. Those are the devices that take the liquid anesthetic agent and vaporize it and deliver it to the patient. A gas monitor is actually taking a sample from the patient and measuring how much gas there is in that sample. Here's some, again, examples that you're probably familiar with. We find a lot of biomeds don't actually do the anesthesia. They might just do the capnometer. Some of them do both. So where do we find these? Well, as I mentioned, you can have standalone devices. You can have them plug into patient monitors like the GE and the Philips. We're seeing them now on infusion pumps. Defibrillators almost always have them now. Anesthesia machines, like I mentioned, and we find them pretty much everywhere within a hospital these days. Even down to like ambulances have them, transports, all that stuff, anywhere where there's patients basically. We're even finding them now in dentist's office, which is quite interesting, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're even finding them in repair depots, but what's funny about this is they're in repair depots unnecessarily oftentimes. When we interviewed and talked to repair depots, they mentioned that they often get these devices coming in for repair, but they don't actually need it. They were just tested incorrectly, and so that's a costly mistake that takes time and money to send it out to these repair depots with no reason. So that was a little bit about devices. Now we just want to build a foundation on capnography. Again, it's measuring exhaled carbon dioxide. We call that the end-tidal CO2, and typically that's a number like 32 millimeters of mercury. If you get a waveform, this waveform is actually called a capnogram, and this is capnography, which is kind of a more advanced version of capnometry. And this little point right here in red, that's where the end-tidal CO2 number comes from. It's the last value before the patient starts to inhale. And so some devices will just give a number, and a lot of devices will give the waveform also. Now, I know you know this, but it's not the same thing as pulse ox. A pulse ox is what you put on your finger to measure how much oxygen is in your blood, but we like to make the distinction because we want to talk about why capnometry is important. So we often use an analogy. In a car, you have a gas and you mix it with oxygen and you burn it to get combustion, and that produces carbon monoxide, which is a waste gas. It makes power, but also makes this waste gas. Well, humans are actually very similar in that we take sugar, glucose, mix it with oxygen and put it through a chemistry cycle, and we get power and energy for our cells, but we produce carbon dioxide. So it's really the waste gas from this process. And so CO2 actually provides an instant assessment of how your respiratory health is doing because it's measuring this waste gas. Pulse ox only shows you how much oxygen is in your blood, but you can have a lot of oxygen in your blood, and if you don't convert it or can't convert it because something's wrong in your respiratory system, then you won't be making waste gas. And so by measuring the waste gas, you get a much better assessment, an instant assessment of how someone's doing. So to a trained medical professional, you can identify specific value or issues and provide correction. These are just some of the different things that they can identify. We're not going to spend much time on this because honestly, it's a little over my head, but a trained professional can look at these and know what's wrong with the patient and correct for it. Because of its clinical value, clinicians are really starting to embrace capnometry, or have been for the last decade or so. There's also been a large number of changes in the standards of care and association guidelines. This is just a small sample of the changes that have happened in the last 2 decades. But basically now, any patient who is administering their own pain meds or having CPR or a cardiac event of some kind, if they're ventilated, intubated, or if they're sedated at all, they're supposed to be on capnometry, which is a whole chunk of the population in a hospital. So how is this affecting your teams? Well, first off, you need to make sure your gas monitors are working properly, and they have to work properly under a wider range of conditions, because it's not just in the operating room anymore. It's, it's everywhere, even in a mobile situation. And because of how it's being adopted, there's more and more and more of these devices. We've seen hospitals that have 150 different capnometers, and not only their numbers are large, but the models are also large, because now instead of having 1 or 2 models, you might have 5 or 6 different models that you have to test or do PMs on. And so really your PMs do need to be adequate. They need to do a good job, but you got to be efficient at it, which is why we developed the SmartTank. So a little bit more about failure modes. They can fail in a couple different ways. The common ones are out of calibration, poor sampling, leaks, or other mechanical problems. We're going to talk about a couple of these briefly so you understand why it's important to detect these failures. So for example, poor sampling, that can happen because your pump is weak or defective. It can be a filter that's plugged somewhere in the system or a line that's partially blocked. The flows that we're talking about are actually really small for gas monitors. They're 30 milliliters a minute up to 200 milliliters a minute. This is much less than, say, a ventilator, which is measured in liters per minute. And if you have poor sampling, you can get a delayed response in the waveform and the numbers. So a patient may be having an issue and it might delay 30 seconds, a minute longer than it should because of a poor sampling, and that's critical time. You can also get incorrect readings. The gas monitors have a CO2 sensor built into them, and they need a certain amount of flow just to work. And if that flow is low, then that can be a problem. And so the best practice for this really is to always check your sample rate. But it's interesting, in our research, what we found is a lot of people may test their sample rate, but they don't test it with a flow meter that's adequate for the job. We've seen people use their vent testers to try to test these very small flow rates, and they're just not sensitive enough. So you got to make sure you have a flow meter that works properly. So the next failure mode we want to talk about is leaks. And I think we have another poll here. Let's see what people say.
We do, Brent. Let's go ahead. We're going to launch this next poll. Attendees, you should be able to see it on your screen now. The question is, do you test for leaks on your gas monitors? The options are yes or no. Brent, while we're talking, there were a couple of questions that came in. I feel like you have addressed these, but while we're letting the attendees vote, I did want to cover these. Okay. What are the measuring units that are used?
Sorry, say that again.
The measuring units that are used.
So it depends on what part of the device we're talking about. The device has got different sensors built into it. So it's got a flow meter, a pressure gauge, it's got a barometer, all these different things. So the flow meters typically are milliliters per minute. Pressures are adjustable depending on where you're at. Some people use different units than others, but they're standard pressure units. I hope that answered the question.
Sounds great to me. And it gave the attendees enough time to answer. So let me close the poll and I'm going to share this for everyone. Do you test your leaks on gas monitors? 81% of the attendees today say
Great.
yes, they do, and 19% say no. So I'm
Good.
going to have this. It'll take us back to the presentation. There you go, Brent.
Large chunk of you get a golden star. That's awesome. So leaks are actually a real problem with gas monitors. That's the one downside of these side stream gas monitors. If you have a leak, it can dilute the sample. And so it actually will mix room air because it's a vacuum, it's sucking that in. It can mix room air in with the sample and you actually get really low readings compared to what they should be. And so leaks are a problem. We did some research and we did some studying where we introduced or simulated leaks on 5 different devices at 1 milliliter a minute, which is a very, very, very small volume or leak, right? You're talking about filling 1 milliliter of volume in a minute. So it's a very small leak. There's not really much change. But as soon as you get to 2 or 3 milliliters a minute, you're already deviating from the proper reading by 2, 3, 4%. By the time you're out to 4, you're down 6, 7% on some of these devices. The low flow devices, these ones that have like the 30 to 50 milliliter minute flow rates, are really susceptible to these leaks. This one on the right over here is actually an Anesthesia device. It has a 200 milliliter minute leak rate, or sorry, sample rate. And so these little leaks don't affect it nearly as much because it's such a large flow rate, but these other ones, it's important to check for. The other thing to realize that leaks can be exacerbated when a patient's on a mechanical ventilator. That additional pressure the ventilator is putting on them and the system can actually make those leaks worse. And so a lot of people don't realize that. And so you really should be doing a full leak check on your devices every time because it is important. We're going to talk briefly here about barometric pressure and its calibration. The sensors or the devices use barometric pressure to get a partial pressure of the gas reading. So for example, if I've got 5% CO2 at 600 millimeters of mercury, that's my ambient pressure, that's a 30 millimeters mercury partial pressure. That's the units, those are the measurements that it uses for to provide for the medical staff. Well, the problem is, barometers always want you to verify the barometer and the readings, and a lot of them can be calibrated. So that needs to be checked out. You also will use it when you're doing your spot checking or your calibration because you have to take the calibration gas and convert it to a partial pressure oftentimes. So you'll need access to a good barometric pressure. The problem we found, and as we were talking to people, is that a lot of people incorrectly use weather websites to get their barometric pressure. What they don't understand is that these are all corrected to sea level. And so if you're at any elevation at all, it's going to be a higher reading than the actual reading. We had a customer call us one day. They just gotten their SmartTank and they called us and said, this thing's giving me wrong readings. And after a while, we realized that he'd been using these and they had calibrated incorrectly and they were off by quite a bit because of that. But with the SmartTank, they were able to calibrate and get it correct. So just as an example, if you're at 1,000 feet, you can be off by 4%. By the time you get to 4,000 feet, you're off by 16%. And so it really is important to make sure you have a gauge of some kind to give you an accurate reading there on site and not just rely on weather websites. So I brought that up because that ties into the last failure mode I want to talk about, which is just being out of calibration. We've seen people use the wrong gas. Sometimes that's by accident, sometimes that's by choice. We've seen people deliver that gas incorrectly to the gas monitor. You're supposed to have a collection of bags and tubes and different things to get the gas out of the bottle to room pressure so that you can then draw that sample into the device. But if you're forcing it in, it can actually mess up your calibration. A lot of people don't wait long enough to calibrate them. And again, they use the wrong barometric pressure. So all of that stuff is things you should avoid in order to get a good calibration. All right, so I'm hoping you guys are understanding that the PMs are more significant than most people think. They really do provide very vital information to key staff members. You know, a nurse may not understand it. They might not see a capnometer as important, but the respiratory therapists and others will. And seemingly small things like a small little leak, which looks, you know, on the surface like benign, it can actually have a bigger impact on performance than you expect. So really, the ideal testing methods are defined in the service manuals. There's no magic sauce that's like everything can just be tested this way. They spend years developing these devices, and in that process, they learn and validate these things, and then they learn how they fail, and they develop these PMs to be able to catch those. If they could get rid of the PMs, they would, but they just can't. So proper testing really does require a variety of equipment. It does require many different steps oftentimes. Some of the anesthesia monitors are very complicated. They do take time sometimes. And it's interesting, so when we go out and watch people, they say they follow the service manuals, but what we actually see is many shops end up just calibrating with CO2, and they skip the flow and leak tests completely, which is a mistake. They do use the adjusted barometric pressure instead of a gauge, and they often don't have the proper equipment. Those are all things that we've talked about. We ask them, why do you guys do this? What's the reason for this? Why don't you follow the service manual? And they say, oh, it's a little more complex, or it takes too much time. I just got too many devices to get through, and I understand you guys are all busy. But one thing is there's kind of this attitude of, hey, it's only a capnometer, it's not that big a deal. And hopefully this presentation's helped you understand that it's a little bit more important than you may realize. So at this point, we took all this information that we had and gathered as we were testing and talking to people, and we designed the SmartTank. We actually designed it twice. I don't recommend that, but the second time was even better. And we came up with the SmartTank, which is the only device on the market designed to test gas monitors. This is what the SmartTank looks like. I'm just going to quickly orient you, and then we'll switch over to a demo. On the front screen, there's actually two ports for connecting the sample line to an exhaust line, and there's a touch screen. They've got these adjustable feet. You can use it on a bench. You can set it on the backside and then put it on a cart and stand there and do your testing that way. A lot of our customers do that. It has a carrying case. You can carry it around over your shoulder and do your testing that way also. On the side of the SmartTank is a place to put the gas bottles. They slide into the device. That's most of the volume of this device is actually protecting the bottle. You change the bottles out based on the device you're testing. You've got a USB port, which allows you to download reports from the device, which it makes automatically. There's a power plug. You can run it off power, or there's a battery that will run all day, at least 8 hours on a full charge. So again, the best way to learn is through a demo. Before I get switched over to the live version, I do want to orient you on my setup. I have this SmartTank sitting here. It's sitting next to this yellow capnometer, which is a microstream device. It's actually the same technologies that's in a Philips 3015A device. This port, this sample line is connected over here to A, and this exhaust line is connected over to B. You'll see there's nothing else connected between them. There's no other devices, and these connections will remain the same throughout the demo, even though I'm going to do different things with it. So at this point, I gotta remember how to switch my cameras. Oops, that was not the right one. Give me 1 second.
Sure, and right now, Brent, I can see the website if that's helpful.
Yeah, I need to turn that off.
So, which was a great opportunity for me to remind the attendees that once the demo is over, please do go to SmartTank Tester. You can learn more on this equipment. Now I can see the camera that's forward facing, and now we can see the SmartTank screen.
Great, and that's all you can see, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a live view of these two devices. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on over here because I always forget. I'm showing you the touch screen on the device so you can kind of see how it works and what I'm doing in a close-up view. So this is the page you get when you start up the SmartTank. We're going to come here to the main screen. The main screen shows you battery and date and time, but this top one shows you the gas that's installed. So if I click on that, you can actually see what gas is in the SmartTank. This is a 5% CO2 mix. Tells you how much pressure and stuff's left in the bottle. The SmartTank works and revolves around what we call test sequences. You can pick them here. If you come in here, you'll see them. There's a whole library of sequences. These sequences are designed and we write them specifically to go for different models and different devices. We follow the service manual and we create all these sequences. If we don't have a sequence for you, we'll create one for you for free. If you want any of these sequences modified, we'll go ahead and modify those for free also. It's just a commitment we make to our customers. So you'll notice there's just like all the GE ones are in here. There's a whole bunch, and this library is not complete, but we're adding to it all the time. I want to point out that there's actually the Philips 3015A. You'll notice there's a full and a simple. The full is everything that's in the service manual. Every single step is in there. But sometimes we do a simple one, and the simple one is just the basic things that you should definitely check, which is your flow, leak, and your calibration. And so it's up to you which one you use. For today, I'm going to use this 3015A sequence because it's very simple. It only has 3 steps, and it lets me show you what the SmartTank does. Unfortunately, this microstream doesn't have all the same interfaces, so I'll fake a few things just for expediency's sake today and time, but you'll get an idea, and if you've done these before, you'll understand. So once I pick the device, I'm going to hit load. I'm going to hit start. It will load that test sequence. And then it will just remind me that I need a certain gas. That way I don't leave the shop without it. I can enter in the asset ID. This will all go in the report. You can enter in initials for whoever's doing it. That goes in the report. This is going to tell you where we pulled the information for this PM. So this came from part number, which is a service manual published June of 2016, starting on page 84. So you could always go back to this service manual and verify or double check things if you want. This is just reminding you what modules this is applicable to, so you get the right one. This tells you how often you should be doing it. And this is the very first test. We're going to test or verify the barometric pressure. So when we designed the SmartTank, we really wanted to make these screens easy to get through without a lot of text. But we also wanted to give you enough information to be able to do this if you've never done it, if it's been 9 months. And so you'll notice like this one says enter service mode and there's a little star. Well, the star just says, hey, there's more details down here. So if you need a reminder, you can click on this and it will tell you exactly how to navigate to that service mode. If you already know that, if you've memorized it, if you've done it 1,000 times, then you don't need to look at this. And we even have things like the default passcodes on here. So at this point, it's to ask me to navigate. This is one of those things, this yellow one doesn't have an easy menu to get into, so we'll just pretend like I'm looking at a barometric pressure. And at this point, it's saying, hey, you need to tell me what it says under barometric pressure. It should be 673. That's based off the barometric sensor in the SmartTank, and the pass-fail criteria is 12. So I'm going to fail this on purpose. I'm going to say like 650. And you'll see it says, oh, that failed. And at this point, I'm going to do next. And it's going to walk me through how to actually recalibrate a Philips 3015A. The sequences are smart in that they try to guide you only through the screens that you need to see. So if I back up and pass this now, we're going to put like 672 in there. If I pass it and I hit next, you'll notice that it just skips all that calibration stuff. There's no reason to calibrate it, just move on. And so that's kind of what the sequences do and how they try to guide you through it. So now we're on the second of 3 tests within the sequence. All it's going to do is check for our flow rate, which needs to be between those values. And it's going to actually do a leak check because we have it hooked up to this exhaust port. So I'm going to hit start. And it will take about 12 seconds to do this. It's testing both for leak and sample. And notice that I haven't touched any of the cords or the tubes or connections. I don't have to get out a flow meter. I don't have to get any of that stuff pulled together because it's all built into the SmartTank. All right, so it's finished. It measured a flow of 45.6, and the leak, it passed because it's less than our limit detection, which is 0.5 milliliter a minute, which is very, 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 very small leak. And so it passed both of those. So we're done, that's all we have to do. If it failed, and there was a way to adjust the gain on the pump, which some devices have. It would walk you through that, but we passed, so we'll hit next. And now we're on the last of the 3 little steps in this, the SmartTank, or sorry, for this 3015A. It's reminding me to be on for 20 minutes. And it's wanting me to go to a certain mode over here. For sake of brevity, I'm not gonna do that. And then it's gonna get to this one where it says, when you're told to turn on the cal gas, touch cal gas and deliver the gas. So I'm gonna do that. And while it's going, I'll talk to you about what's happening. So if you watch the yellow device over here, you'll actually see that it's getting gas now. And so the SmartTank has in it a manifold that brings it down to room pressure, and it delivers just the right amount of gas for this capnometer. That's one of the things we really wanted to do, was to design the SmartTank so it'd save as much gas as possible. So remember, we measured it at 47 milliliters a minute. So it's delivering about 50 milliliters a minute right now. If this device wanted 200 milliliters a minute, we'd deliver about 203 milliliters a minute. And so by doing that, we use the very bare minimum amount of gas that's needed to do these calibrations. Most of you probably use a regulator, and we've tested it. We've had customers test it. When you crack a regulator just a little bit, you're using 200, 250 milliliters minimum of gas. And so in this case, that would be 4 to 5 times more gas than you actually need for this device. The other thing we did that you'll notice right here is it's counting down. It will auto turn off. So if you happen to walk away, you don't burn through your entire gas bottle. You can always touch it and extend it, or adjust the timeout time to something else, or even turn that feature off completely. So at this point, in theory, the device is calibrated, and now we want to do our calibration verification. It's asking you to go in, deliver gas again, and then to provide a value, this value that's going to be 1 millimeters of mercury. So historically, you would have had to do this calculation, take the 5% times the atmospheric pressure, but the SmartTank will just do that for you. It automatically calculates. It should be 33.7, and then the pass-fail criteria. And so we're just going to go ahead and say, yeah, that passes, because we just calibrated it. All of this will go in the test report. I'm going to hit next, and it'll automatically shut the gas off. And this is the simplest of all of our test sequences. It's done, and it passed. At this point, we hit next. It's going to generate a test report. This test report will have everything that we just did. If I did a calibration, if I adjusted something, all that information will be in here. So you'll see if I scroll down, the barometric pressure I entered is in here. The value that the SmartTank measured is in here. All the pass-fail criteria are in here. Oh, that was it. Sorry. The flow stuff is all right here. All that information is provided in the report. These reports are on the SmartTank and can be retrieved. You can either get to them here and look at them on the SmartTank, or you can download them by USB. You simply plug the SmartTank into a computer or into a smart device of some kind, and it shows up as a mass storage device. You pull the reports off, attach them to work orders or into any of your systems, however you guys like to manage that information. We always get asked, how many reports can it hold? Well, you can hold years, 10 years worth of reports, because they're just simple text files. So at this point, I'm done. You can then do another PM on a different device. Just walk over and start. Like if you're doing a whole series of them, it remembers the last one you did. Or if, let's say you're doing some maintenance and you tested something, you can actually come back in through these other options, and you can do, let's say you replace the pump, or you did something with the pump. Well, you can go back in and test just the pump using that same flow and leak test procedure, but it's not built into the sequence. It's more of a manual process. And so you could retest something. Also point out that you can do leak down tests with the SmartTank. So like the PM say, the SmartTank will actually pressurize your device and then let it stabilize, start a timer, take a reading, start a timer, and then take the final reading at the end of that time, and then tell you the drop in pressure. So it will do that automatically for you. A lot of the sequences have that built in, but the one I showed you does not. You can do other like alarm things. It'll even do like pressure relief. So if you ever do non-invasive blood pressure, this pressure relief is the safety test to make sure that it opens safety valves at a certain pressure, so the SmartTank will do that. We have customers who use the SmartTank to do all of their non-invasive blood pressure testing. Since the SmartTank has built into it a barometer, a manometer or pressure gauge, and a flow meter, we make those available also, where you can come in and see what the flow rate is on something. So in this case, we're still getting a good positive flow because it's still running. Or I can switch it over to show a manometer. In this case, it's a vacuum that's being drawn because it's drawing that sample out of the SmartTank. And so in this case, it's a good vacuum gauge. You can even get to the barometer readings if you just need to see what those are for something else. And then finally, there's also a breath simulation mode, which a lot of our customers like because they can just spot check devices. But if I turn this on and you watch this yellow screen over here, make that a little bigger, you can see that it's now simulating a patient breath. It's 20 breaths per minute, and it's a 33, which is kind of what's expected. I'll go back. So you can see it's supposed to be 33, and it's reading 33 over on this device right here. And the 20 breaths per minute actually. So you can configure that. So a lot of our customers like that because they can go out. If somebody's like, this isn't working, they can walk out on the floor and just test it real fast and reassure people. So again, the test sequences are kind of what we revolve around. I picked the simplest of all of them. Some of these test sequences might have 20 or 30 different kind of steps in them. And it just depends on the service manual. The GE modules are kind of icky because you have to do a whole bunch of different things in those. And so those can be a little longer too. I'm just thinking, let me show you real fast. I got to remember how to, okay, share my screen again. So I showed you a kind of a demo version of a PM. You're seeing my screen, I assume.
Yes.
If you go to our website and go to this tutorial page, there's actually some videos of actual PMs on, like full PMs. We do talk through them, but there's ones for like the Philips, which is very common. There's the GE ones, both the anesthesia and regular CO2. There's all these other devices on here. This is the simplified test sequence, is the one I just did, but this is an actual one on a Philips 3015. And so those are available there. You can actually see a video on how the pressure leak down is actually done, or if you needed a vacuum leak, it will show you how to set that up and do it. It's pretty straightforward. On our website also, if you go to this by gas monitor under calibration gas, you can see a list of all the devices we are currently supporting. We actually support more than this, but they're not all listed. We have some sequences that are written that we haven't released yet because we're still trying to test them. And again, we make the commitment to always write a sequence for you or change a sequence for free if there's something you don't like about it or want it adjusted to meet your needs. But you can see here the gases that would be needed, as along with you can actually download the sequences here. So let's say 2 years from now, there's a new device on the market and we write a sequence for it, it'll show up on this website and you just come here, retrieve it, load it on the SmartTank, and away you go. So I think that's about what I have today. I know there's questions. I usually like interactive. So hopefully some of you guys are typing out questions as we speak so I can answer them.
They are, and I am ready to hit you with a couple of them. Since you were just talking about the sequences, I have some questions that pertain to that. One attendee would like to know, what if we can't find a test sequence for one of our devices?
Good question. You could always check this website. If you don't find it there, you could email us and we will gladly help you find it. They are just simple text files that go on the device. So we literally can email you the test sequence. You just drop it in a folder on that mass storage drive when you hook it up to a computer, and then it will show up on the SmartTank as an available sequence. Same thing if you wanted something tweaked. Let's say there's a line, like we have a customer who always calibrates his touch screens on his patient monitors at the same time he does a CO2 module check. And he's like, can you add this as a step in my sequence so I don't forget and it's documented? And we're like, sure. And so we made him a custom sequence takes a day or less than a day, just depends on our schedule, but it's pretty quick. We emailed it to him and he was super happy. We had another customer who's like, hey, I have to always do these non-invasive blood pressures and I do them at the same time. Can you write a sequence for this? And we're like, yep. And we wrote him a sequence to do all that.
Brent, I love that so much. It not only speaks to the quality of the product that your company's putting out, but the customer service that you provide too, that I know is so important, especially for HTM professionals who are working for patient safety and care. I love that interaction that you're sharing with us. A couple of the attendees have asked this same question. How frequently do we need to calibrate the SmartTank, and do I need to send it out for calibration?
Great question. So yes, you do have to send it out for calibration. It's once a year, like most devices. We're hoping to be able to extend that down the road when we get more test data, but for now it is once a year. There are 3 devices. Again, the barometer is NIST traceable, so is the manometer, and so is the flow meter. And so for that single price, you get all 3 of those calibrated. A lot of people are concerned, or they want to do it themselves. The problem is our flow meter is super accurate, and it takes a very specialized system to do the calibration, and most people don't have the equipment for it. Plus, it's fully automated. We calibrate over like 30 different points, and so it's important that it be done here. But I know people are worried about turnaround time. We are always going to turn around within 2 weeks, and usually we'll turn around within a couple days. That's a commitment we make. It is an automated system for us, but it just takes a few hours for it to run through that calibration. The other thing that we do is every time you send it in for calibration, we extend your warranty 1 year. So you have the ability to get a 4-year warranty, up to a 4-year warranty on this device. It comes with a 1 year at first, and then every time you send it in, we'll extend it.
I love that. One attendee would like to know, I think we talked about this, but can the SmartTank help test anesthesia monitors?
Yes, definitely. It's designed to do both kinds of gas monitors, both the CO2 and the more advanced. Again, that's why the gas bottles go in it. You can change out the bottles. So there are anesthesia gas mixes that you would use. Those PMs are a little more complicated because you do have to calibrate for 4 different gases. So they just take a little bit more time, but they still do a leak test and flow test. They actually sometimes have additional pressure tests that are written into them, but it's all stuff the SmartTank will do.
I love that. And I know in the presentation you showed some of the gas bottles. Do the attendees, do they need to use your gas bottles or can they use something else?
Great question again. So yes, you do use our gas bottles. The problem is the gases all come in a variety of shapes and sizes. And so we had to standardize on one. Plus we have on the bottle, let me see if I can show you. We have on the bottle an RFID tag, we call it. That tells the SmartTank what gas is in there. So we actually can prevent you from calibrating with the wrong gas. So if you're doing a sequence and it's like, hey, put this gas bottle in, and you put the wrong gas bottle in, it will tell you and keep you from going on. And it also records into the test the lot number, expiration date. So all that's documented. So you have full documentation of what was done. There are some tests like the Philips 3015A full test, you actually have to switch from 5% to 10% and you could forget. And so it just helps you remember that. But our commitment is, and a lot of people are worried, oh, you guys are going to gouge me on gas prices. Well, we will always meet or beat any price on gas as long as we compare it based on volume. So the reason I say that is you might get a little hairspray type can of anesthetic gas that's only 40 or 50 PSI, and it might cost half what our gas bottle is, but our gas bottle will be bigger and it will be 240 PSI. So you're getting like 5 times more gas. And so as long as we compare that, we'll meet or beat any price. To this date, we've never found anybody cheaper than we are. So
I love that. And back to that great customer service that you get with this company. A couple of the attendees asked when you were talking about the reports and showing us on the screen there, can you print the reports or export them to a database?
Good question. You cannot connect a printer directly to the SmartTank. That's not a feature we have. You can download the report through that mass storage and then print it to a network printer, or take that text file and attach it however you'd like. That could go in a database, it could go into a shared folder, it just depends. We've seen every shop's a little different. Most of them are using, systems now to kind of monitor all that and do the work orders, so they just get attached straight up. We even have some customers just copy and paste the report from the text file straight into the record. So it's not really an attachment, but it's actually in the record itself as the text, and that's really easy too.
Good. Sounds like some options. I'm going to read this one for you. I'll lean in a little. With leakage taken into account, is it better to change the flow rate to a higher flow if you can?
If you have a leak on a device, you should fix the leak. Some devices do come with pumps that can be kind of calibrated to a specific flow. That you would do that, like if the pump's starting to struggle or there's some kind of minor blockage and the flow rate's a little low, you might bump up the flow rate to be in spec. But if you know you have a leak, you should not compensate by just adjusting the pump, because again, it could be mixing room air with the sample, and now you're just diluting out the sample and getting false readings.
Good to know. And I have two questions here that deal with OEMs. The first, an attendee is asking if you know, is the Draeger Capno also supported?
That's not one I know of right this second, but it doesn't mean we won't do it or can't do it. We have not found a device yet that we can't support. It's just more a matter of bandwidth for us to get all these test sequences written. So what we ask our customers, they want a new sequence written that we don't have. Again, it's free, but we ask them for two things. We ask them to help us find a service manual, because sometimes those are very hard to find, as I'm sure everybody knows. And you probably have them if you're doing those PMs. And then the second thing is, once we write the sequence, please just bear with us, test it out, report back on whether or not there's any issues with it. We don't have all of these devices in our shop, and so we will write it based off the service manual and then work with the customer to just tweak it and smooth it out and make sure that there's no authoring issues, like we didn't write it wrong or missed something. And then once it's good, you're good to go, and then we just kind of make that available on our website.
Keeping OEMs in mind, do you have manufacturer approval to use these devices on their monitors?
We've talked to a number of them and they're aware of it. They don't typically endorse products. Sometimes they'll reference them, like they'll reference a flow meter, but then they always say, or something equivalent. So like, use this flow meter or something equivalent. So they don't tend to care as much as long as you're doing it correctly and you're using, they don't make money off the PMs. Well, unless you send it to them and they're contracted, that's another story. But they don't really make money on you doing the PMs and selling you equipment and stuff. As far as the gas goes, it's all certified gas from a gas manufacturer. It's made to the same standards that any of the other gas is made to.
I love that. An attendee is asking if they could see the video library again that you shared with us on the screen. I could see that those were linked to YouTube as well, and with TechNation launching TechNation TV, we'd love to share some of this information for our audience there. Do you have a YouTube channel that we could promote also?
I can look into that. Yes, we do have a YouTube channel. They're on there, but we usually point people here. But we have had people come to us through YouTube, and it's something we actually want to work on and improve. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but we can get that out by email. So they wanted to see the video again, or the library again?
They wanted to see I guess the offerings in this library.
Yeah.
I love that LifeSpark Medical has thought to do these sequence tutorials.
Yeah, we have plans to do additional ones. We're still trying to get additional devices to do other ones, because again, we can't afford or have all these devices. If you're willing to loan us a device for a week, we'd love to write a sequence and do a video on it. You can always reach me. We are planning on adding more here. There's also other videos on some of the features and benefits pages that are more promotional, marketing with fancy music. They'll tell you more about what the SmartTank does, but for those who have done these a lot and know how to do PMs, they really should be looking here, because you can see from this, you can see that the SmartTank will facilitate and streamline your testing process. Again, you don't have to get anything out of a bag. You don't have to adjust anything. You just run through it as fast as possible, and it will take care of most of the work for you. You have to enter a few things and navigate the other device, but you don't have to stress over it too much. So what our customers find is that the SmartTank allows them to do the same testing in a shorter amount of time, and it's fully documented. And like a manager knows that everybody's doing it exactly the same way because they're all following the same sequence. Or for those who don't do all the testing, they may not save any time because they were cutting corners before, but now in the same amount of time, they can do the full test and get a much better, PM done that's also, again, fully documented. We have one customer who just contacted us looking for another device, and he told me that the SmartTank is the best investment he's made in the last 2 years because it's really streamlined everything. It's anecdotal, maybe, but we were really happy to hear that. That's been our goal this entire time.
I love that so much. It's always great to hear things like that. And a big focus for TechNation is making sure that we're bringing tools and solutions to our community that can save time and money. And it sounds like we've checked both of those boxes here today.
Definitely.
I had one more attendee ask a question. They wanted to know if by chance you have a sequence for a Philips G7 gas module.
I have that drafted somewhere. It may not be on the website. We can look. I know I've written that one. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here. So yeah, that one's on here. I have this done. It's available upon request only because we've not had a chance to validate it with somebody. We don't like to give it away to everybody right away because we want somebody to walk through it and make sure it's accurate. And so yeah, we have that one, and we have the gas for it too.
I love that. Well, while we're looking at the website, I'm going to point out that very last option on the nav bar, schedule a demo. I know I mentioned a little earlier at MD Expo Vegas in April, LifeSpark Medical will be there with the SmartTank, so you could get a hands-on demo, maybe even speak to Brent personally if he's going to join us at that
Yep,
conference. But if you're not able to get to Vegas, then certainly visit the website, smartttanktester.com, and do that scheduled a demo. Or in 1 hour from right now, we're going to send you out a post-broadcast survey. Of course, this survey is how you're going to get your CE certificate. You answer the questions and submit it, and then your certificate will be available for download on your computer. I bring this up because you'll also have an opportunity. One of the questions is, would you like to learn more from this company or about the product that we talked today? So if you are curious, I know a couple of you have chatted multiple questions, so I know you want to learn a little bit more. Use that survey as your opportunity to seek out or to request a follow-up call. Brent, before I wrap up, anything else you want to share with TechNation?
Yeah, I just wanted to schedule a demo. So we typically do virtual demos. The last portion of this where it was live is kind of the typical demo. I don't normally go through the PowerPoint. That was more for the continuing education. We'd be glad to do that with you again if you want to see it, or let's say you have a manager or team members that you want to drag in, and we'll do the demo for them and answer all their questions. We also have a program where we can send out a demo unit to people who might want to touch it and feel it after we've done virtual demos. But we're always here to help, and we'd love to talk to you about the SmartTank.
It's great. Thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot. I know the TechNation community did too. Guys, just a reminder that survey is going to come out in 1 hour. It is via email. You do need to complete that survey to get your CE certificate. And don't forget, we've got more webinars. I know we're wrapping up 2023, but a couple of more webinars in December and another Tools of the Trade live demo. You can go to webinarwednesday.live to learn more about that. And this recording is going to be on webinarwednesday.live and our on-demand archives, and you can find it on TechNation TV. You can get there by going to TechNation.tv. That's so sad. I couldn't even think of our own URL, TechNation.tv. And you can find us on YouTube. All right, guys, stay safe. We're going to see you again soon. Brent, have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.